In previous parts of this costume, we finished the dress, we finished the hat, which means that it is time for the last big part, which is of course the shoulders. Looking at the reference images, I figured foam would be really nice to make it with. Maybe it is my cosplay and armor making speaking, and I know that in the actual dress it could possibly be made out of fabric because, well, it is based on actual garments, but looking at the pictures, I figured foam would do that job really nicely. So, without further ado, let's get crafting. Looking at the reference images of Frollo, the shoulders consist of two main parts. The part that is actually draped over the shoulders, and the two things poking out at the sides. I'll start with the middle part and figure out the two sides at a later point. I measured the width of my shoulders at 40 centimeters and estimated what would be a nice length from the front to the back, which turned out to be 40 centimeters as well. So I copied these measurements to paper to make a paper mock-up pattern. With just a paper pattern, this is what it looks like, and I think size-wise it is pretty okay. The only change I think I'm going to make is make it a little bit smaller. Because if you look at the reference images, I don't think it sticks out this far from the side of his shoulders. But I quite like the length on this side and on the back as well. What I, however, haven't decided yet is what I want to do with the neckline, because I currently just cut it as wide as it needed to be to actually fit over my head. But I don't think it has to be this wide when I actually make it out of foam. So I'm probably just going to make a slit in the backside with some Velcro or something, so I can just put it on. And then I will need someone else to help me close it up properly so you don't see the seam. But other than that, I think that's the easiest. So I can shorten this a bit and then we can start cutting it from foam. After adjusting the mock-up, we can cut the first big part from foam. For this middle part, I went with 3mm foam. In the meanwhile, I had also decided what I wanted to do for the neckline. So I cut a neck-sized circle in the middle and cut a slit in the back so it would be possible to put it on and take it off again. Then, looking at the pictures, you can see two different colors with a very thin red border. To mark this transition, I traced the pointed shape onto foam and freehand cut a thin strip away from the foam. I did this by keeping my knife close to the line and angling it to the middle, so a triangular strip was cut away. This has to be done rather carefully, so as to not cut all the way through the foam. Next up, we can pattern the shoulder bits. To determine the size, I held up a piece of paper and slid it out from under the neck bit, until it had a size I liked. The corners of the pieces are rounded, so I traced those on the paper as well. Because I semi-freehanded them, they are different on both sides. So I decided which one I liked best, folded the paper, and cut both corners at the same time, making them the same again. They were then traced and cut from 1cm foam. With foam of this thickness, you have to make sure you do not angle your blade at all, which can get slightly difficult with the rounded corners. The entire middle part is surrounded by a wide raised edge. I decided to use 5mm foam for this. Drawing this pattern was easy. I traced the middle part itself for the outline and drew the inner line 3.5cm away from it. To make sure the ring opened on the same location as the slit in the middle part, I stacked them, turned them over and cut the slit. To make the shoulder parts adhere to the middle without showing glue, I decided to cut into the middle bit. Considering this will be covered by the raised ring of 3.5cm, I went with 1.5cm for the shoulders to fit in. Then the ring could be glued on with contact cement. If you are unfamiliar with this type of glue, you have to apply it to both sides, let it dry for a bit, and then sandwich them together. These types of glue are generally pretty strong, but also not the nicest to work with. So really make sure you have ventilation and preferably wear a mask. After gluing it together, I let it dry overnight with some weight on it. Then all the edges could be sanded even with a Dremel, making sure the ring aligns with the middle part underneath and rounding off the edges of the shoulder bits. After that, we can shape the shoulders. This is done by heating them up with a heat gun and bending them to shape. Repeating the heating and the bending until they keep the shape you want them in. Then I quickly heat gun the rest to heat seal the foam. This makes the surface more even for a better paint coat later. Then the shoulders could be glued in. Due to the bending of the foam, they don't fit in their gaps perfectly anymore. But with some stretching and flattening, they still went in. We can reshape them with some more heat later. Time for a base coat of spray paint, which I have space for in the shed at the back of our garden. It was pretty cold these days, so I had to work quickly before the can of paint cooled down too much. After 3 layers, it looked somewhat decent, but the coat still wasn't perfectly even. So another coat of watered down black acrylics was painted over top to make it more even. And once you start doing one bit, you realize the entire thing needs a bit of paint. So all the bits that had to end up fully black got another full coat. Then it is time to add some color. I was really lucky to have the exact right color of purple on hand, so I didn't need to mix the color. Which is great, as this bit needed quite a few coats to get nice and even. I also realized halfway that the shoulders had gotten out of shape, so again they could be heated up and bent into shape. When looking at Frollo in the movie, you can see purple peek out from underneath the shoulders, so of course these got a few coats of purple as well. One of the most time-intensive bits of this project were the red stripes on the shoulders. To draw these on properly, I had made a template, which I could line up after marking the center with chalk, and trace the stripes on the shoulders. Then the long process of painting these strips on started. It didn't help that I chose the wrong paint color at first, which didn't show up that well after a few coats. I guess the lesson learned was, do choose your colors with actual daylight instead of evening artificial light. Anyway, with the other color it already went a lot better. I also opted to freehand the lines and not make any use of painter's tape, as the ones I have on hand leave a sticky residue, and somehow I always have paint end up under the tape anyway. After what must have been 6 or 7 coats, I was happy with the coverage and it was time to paint the border between the black and the purple. Because I cut this strip out, I can fold the gap open a bit, insert the paintbrush and paint the line pretty well without having paint end up outside the line. The last foam bits to make are the 2 red diamonds on the front. I made a small paper template and cut them from the 5mm foam. I then freehand cut the sides by again angling the blade to give them the gem-like appearance. They were then also given a few coats of red paint and glued on the front with the contact cement. The last thing to take care of is the closure in the back. For this I got some sturdy fabric tape I had laying around and a bit of velcro. I estimated a nice length and did zigzag finish the edges of the tape, as it did seem to fray a bit. Then I cut some lengths of velcro and sewed the rough velcro bit on the tape. I do it this way around, so in case the velcro isn't attached, it is the soft bit that will actually touch your back, which is nicer than the rough side. Again, it is time for some gluing, with which I attach the tape to one side of the opening and the soft velcro bit on the other side. After drying, it looks like this, and you can get it closed up pretty nicely. And with that, the shoulders are done, which means all the big construction parts on Frollo are finished. All that is left is the collar, wig and some rings. Wearing it, the shoulders did turn out a bit wider than anticipated, but I actually don't mind, it adds to the menacing look. I'm already rather happy with how all of this is coming together, and if you enjoyed it too, you could consider subscribing. And with that, thank you all for watching, and see you next time.